Okay, I gave you my most absurd Nitro moments not too long ago. Now it's time to look at the stuff I actually really liked. I think by now we can all agree that WCW Monday Nitro was absolute chaos. Sometimes the good kind, sometimes the what were they thinking kind, and sometimes both in the same segment. But for all the finger pokes, pole matches, and exploding ice blocks, Nitro gave us some of the most unforgettable, genuinely awesome moments in wrestling history. I'm talking about genuine surprises, moments that made the crowd go crazy, the times when WCW actually got it right and made Nitro feel like must-see TV. Because when WCW clicked, when they weren't tripping over their own egos or rewriting scripts during commercial break, they could deliver moments that still hold up decades later. So today I'm taking a look at 15 of the most awesome, most memorable and most genuinely satisfying moments from WCW Nitro in my opinion. These are all my own personal choices, and some moments you may expect while others you won't expect. These aren't in any particular order either, but the final moment in this video is my favourite Nitro moment of all time. So let's kick things off by going all the way back to the very first episode of Monday Nitro. WCW Nitro kicked off its very first episode live from the Mall of America, providing fans with a very unique backdrop for this debut show, and the company decided to open the broadcast with actual wrestling, believe it or not. Instead of kicking things off with a 15-minute promo, we got Jushin Thunder Liger taking on Brian Pillman in what would set the tone for how Nitro could differentiate itself from the WWF's cartoon-heavy programming at the time. These two had already worked well together in the past. Their Super Brawl 2 encounter is an all-time favourite of mine, and while this Nitro match doesn't really compare to that showdown, this was still a great way to kick off the first ever Nitro. Liger, one of the most innovative high flyers in the world, going move for move with Flying Brian himself, made for a good opener that felt more like something you'd catch in Japan than on American cable TV. Even the commentary team didn't quite seem ready for it. Mongo's at the desk saying whatever comes into his head, Bischoff's trying to remember his bullet points, and Heenan's already given up trying to keep things serious. Welcome to Nitro. In the end, Pillman picks up the win with a roll-up, and just like that, WCW told the world, we're not here to play it safe. You want high-paced action, you want international stars, you want something different from the WWF, then here's your Monday night alternative. And the best part is, we're only getting started. That's what I like so much about this match, it set Nitro apart right from the get-go. You can circle this exact date as the start of the Monday Night Wars getting real. Out comes Scott Hall, Razor Ramon just a few weeks ago on WWF television, walking through the crowd like he owns the place, rocking the denim, chewing a toothpick, and acting like he just showed up to take the whole place over. The match in the ring doesn't matter. Who was booked to appear that night? That doesn't matter either. Hall steps in and instantly steals the entire show with one line. You people, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. It felt unscripted, it felt raw, excuse the pun, and it felt completely out of place in the best way possible. Hall didn't just cut a promo, he made a threat.
You want a war? You're gonna get one.
And that was your hook. It looked like an invasion, it felt like something had gone wrong. This was the beginning of real blurred lines on Monday nights where even fans in the know weren't 100% sure what they were watching. Of course, behind the scenes, Hall's contract with WCW had been sorted out for a while, but this return was handled perfectly. WCW played it subtle. No music, no fanfare, just a guy walking in mid-show and declaring that he was here to destroy the company from within. If that's not an all-time Nitro moment, I don't know what is. And the "you want a war" line is something I've made part of reliving the war every single week. It's just so badass. You know how sometimes you don't realise something important just happened until after it's over? That's exactly what went down on the 16th of September 1996 episode of Nitro, when Sting would come out to cut his final promo as the good old neon-wearing surfer Sting. At the time, WCW was in the middle of a whole who can you trust storyline with the NWO, and no one knew which direction was up anymore. The NWO had added a bunch of new members, they were teasing that Sting had joined the ranks, and Lex Luger, bless him, got attacked by a fake Sting. The Icon swore up and down that he wasn't part of the NWO, yet his best friend, his peers, and many fans just didn't believe him. To prove a point, Sting showed up in War Games 96, he beat up NWO members, including the fake Sting, and he asked Lex if that was proof enough before walking away. So Sting shows up on Nitro after War Games and he's pissed, just tired, fed up and speaking from the gut. He says he heard all the rumours, he heard how people didn't trust him, his own best friend questioned his loyalty, and Sting's starting to wonder if fans could be feeling the same way. There's no over-the-top emotion here. Sting purposely turned his back to the hard camera to deliver this promo, and because he felt WCW didn't trust him anymore, Sting announced that he was now a free agent. He might show up in Japan, he might show up somewhere else in America, but Sting left his future up in the air before walking away, completely ending an entire era of his storied career. The next time we'd see Sting, he was in the Crow gear. He sent mixed signals when asked to join the NWO, and from here he was found on the regular hanging out in the rafters, covered in black and white face paint, holding a baseball bat and not speaking a single word. But it all started with this promo, a soft goodbye to the version of Sting most fans grew up with. It didn't come with a bang, just a slow fade into the shadows, and that honestly made it even better. Alright, by early 1997, the NWO had basically turned WCW into their own personal playground. Every week it was the same thing. New guy joins, old guy turns, someone gets spray painted, you know the drill. And the WCW roster stands around backstage, probably looking a bit confused. The faction was becoming bloated, a little overconfident, and at this point they were trying to recruit everyone, including Diamond Dallas Page. Now DDP was still in that weird space where he wasn't quite a top guy yet, but he wasn't just some mid-carder either. He was grinding and getting over organically, hitting diamond cutters out of nowhere and slowly building that connection with the crowd, the kind of connection that you can't manufacture. So when Hall and Nash approached DDP, it wasn't just some random offer, they knew he had value, and better yet, they played it smart. They didn't beat him down or force the issue, no, they extended a friendly invite. These boys were all friends in the past, so just put the NWO shirt on, man, everyone's doing it, you know. Cut to Nitro in New Orleans. Page is in the ring having a match when out walk Hall and Nash. They get in the ring, Nash gives Dallas a big old hug, and Scott hands over the infamous black and white shirt. The crowd's buzzing as Page takes it, he looks at it and he puts it on, which does get a huge reaction. The commentators are selling it like WCW just lost another soldier, old Tony Jabroni was probably ready to pack it in and call it a career. And then, boom, bang. Diamond cutter to Hall just like that. No build up, no warning, just DDP doing what he does best, dropping people flat without a second thought. The crowd totally loses it, Nash gets tossed over the top rope and Page holds up the diamond cutter sign as the crowd continue to cheer. Page then dashed through the crowd, no follow-up promo needed, just a man who made his statement loud and clear and he didn't need a single word to back it up. This was a big deal when you think about it. Page rejected the NWO when everyone else was lining up to join. He didn't need the faction, the backup, the merch, the backstage pull, but watching him on TV at this time period would make you think he actually did need all these things. He maybe needed help to get those main event spots, yet he still said no to the New World Order and he wanted to do it alone. This wasn't just a cool moment, it was a turning point in his career. It told fans that DDP wasn't going to play politics, he was going to do things his way, and it totally worked too. From this moment on, Page went from the guy with the finisher to the guy fans could believe in. WCW accidentally created a star by letting him say no. That doesn't happen often, especially not in this company. Just to continue on with Dallas for a bit, WCW Nitro in 1997 was on fire. The NWO was running wild, WCW still had a stacked roster, and every now and then they'd throw in a little slice of genius to remind you they could still surprise people. One of the best examples came on July 7th when DDP decided to play a little dress up and give Macho Man Randy Savage a taste of his own medicine. Savage had been running with the NWO at this point and had been making life difficult for DDP, so Page hatched the plan. Macho was scheduled to take on Parka, and if you're thinking that's a bit random, well yeah, it was. Parka came to the ring looking like your usual chairman of WCW, the bell rings, the match starts, Savage is in control, and it's all looking like your standard Monday night filler. That is until Parka suddenly explodes into action, hitting Savage with a diamond cutter out of nowhere. Parka rips off the mask and yeah, it's DDP underneath. Dallas had outsmarted the NWO and the fans loved it. It was one of those moments where WCW nailed the element of surprise, the kind of thing that made live TV wrestling feel unpredictable and something that's just as hard to do now as it was back then. The whole thing only lasted seconds, but it's one of those Nitro clips that gets replayed for a reason. It was simple, clever, and it made you want to see what would happen next. If there's one thing WCW didn't do enough of during the NWO era, it was actually giving the fans a payoff. When Lex Luger finally beat Hollywood Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship live on Nitro, it was a rare case of WCW actually doing what was right. The crowd in Detroit was absolutely electric, one of those Nitro audiences that felt more like a pay-per-view crowd. Luger had been chasing the title on and off, though he had become WCW's main babyface in the absence of Sting. But on August 4th, 1997, Nitro's 100th episode no less, Lex actually did it. He overcame the NWO by taking the world belt from Hollywood Hogan, and he made Hogan tap out. Let me repeat that, Hulk Hogan tapped out live on Nitro. WCW guys stormed the ring to join in on Luger's big moment. Lex is overjoyed, people are hugging, it's chaos, but the good kind of chaos. It was a genuine feel-good moment where WCW got one over on the NWO for once, and it actually felt earned. Of course, Hogan won the belt back a few days later at Road Wild because, well, WCW. But for this one night on Nitro, WCW looked like the top dogs again, and Luger got his moment in the sun. Still a brilliant moment to look back on today. So this is one of those moments you probably didn't expect in this video, but let me explain. This match, as short as it was, really got my friends and I talking after it happened because it felt real. We all thought Scotty got messed up in this match, so I guess it's memorable for me because we all got totally worked. Just goes to show how good Scotty's selling was. Scotty Riggs opposed Raven and Raven's flock. He had previously rejected the group, but old Raven had some interesting ways to make people see the light, so to speak. Raven faced Scotty on the October 27th, 1997 episode of Nitro, and the match ended when Raven performed a drop toe hold onto a steel chair. A signature Raven move, but the way Scotty sold it made it look like he legitimately got injured. The match was called off. Raven even attacked members of his own flock when they tried to reason with him, and EMTs and officials checked on Scotty while Raven took his seat again in the audience. Riggs continued screaming in pain before Nitro took a commercial break, and of course it was all revealed as a big old work when Scotty returned to Nitro wearing an eye patch and being part of Raven's flock. Just one of those little moments I remember well as a kid, a moment that got us all talking after it happened. It means very little to everyone else, I know, but for me it was very memorable. There were a lot of NWO invasions, with the most famous and worst being NWO Nitro in December 97. I talked about that one in the Absurd Moments video. With this in mind, if you want to see an NWO takeover done correctly, then look at the September 23rd, 1996 episode of Nitro. While NWO Nitro seemed like a much more scripted and drawn out takeover of WCW's Monday Night TV show, this one featured the first time WCW really leaned into the whole "we have lost control of the show" vibe, and honestly, it ruled. At the start of the show, Tony Schiavone, who really needed to cut his fingernails, showed an advertisement from USA Today that was paid for by the NWO. The commentators speculated what the NWO were going to do, but no one was prepared for what was going to happen later that night. During a filler match featuring Greg Valentine and Randy Savage, the NWO showed up and they utterly destroyed Randy. The boys then introduced Hollywood Hogan to the ring, and the group announced that this was it. The faction were going to do what they had promised to do since debuting. This was a proper, no-nonsense takeover of the entire broadcast. The faction took over the commentary table, they introduced a new member in Vincent. Yeah, okay, fair enough, not great. But the Giant also took over ring announcing duties, and members of the NWO took over matches. The way it was all done made it look like Nitro had literally been taken hostage. What sold it wasn't just the antics, it was the presentation. The camera cuts felt chaotic, the announcers were shook, and for a brief moment you kinda forgot you were watching a pre-scripted show. WCW managed to convince viewers that the inmates really were running the asylum, which was ironic because backstage that really was actually the case. But what I liked about this so much was the fact that WCW had no choice but to continue putting on matches while the NWO ruined everything. The whole second hour of Nitro was the NWO torturing WCW, and it was glorious. You have to remember that this was the first time this had ever happened, and it really made Nitro feel unique. In terms of presentation, this was one of the most most effective uses of the faction on live TV. The takeover felt dangerous, and WCW played the victims perfectly. WCW may have fumbled Bret Hart's run harder than anyone thought possible, but credit where it's due. This was one of the most clever things they ever let Bret do, and Bret said it was all his idea. Bret had been off TV, frustrated with WCW and the politics backstage. Art imitating life, really. Then, one night in Toronto, out comes Hart in a Calgary Hitman hockey jersey. He says he can excellently execute any wrestler he wants, and he then calls out Goldberg. Sorry, he calls out William Goldberg, the big chicken. To get the Canadian fans even more on his side, Bret reveals a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, and Billy Boy's heard enough. WCW's franchise player shows up, he charges at Bret at full speed, he goes for the spear, and he collapses on impact. The two stay down for a bit, the crowd's a little confused. They then begin to cheer as Bret begins the move, and the Hitman counts 1, 2, 3 while covering Goldberg. Bret's master plan gets revealed when he takes off his jersey. The Hitman was wearing a steel plate. And to top it off, just to show how pissed off he was with WCW, Bret grabs the microphone and simply says, "Hey Bischoff, I quit." Simple, effective, and totally in character for Bret Hart. Why was it so good and why is it so well remembered? I'm not really sure, but I guess we all just wanted Bret to get something substantial to do in WCW, and outsmarting Goldberg was pretty substantial. For all the nonsense, chaos, and general buffoonery that Nitro became known for, sometimes WCW actually did something right. This was one of those rare nights where the show slowed down, the booking stayed out of the way, and two guys were simply allowed to wrestle. And not just wrestle, but honour someone. This was the Owen Hart tribute match, Bret Hart vs Chris Benoit in Kansas City, the very same building where Owen tragically passed away just a few months prior. No promos, no angles, no run-ins, just Bret and Benoit putting on a technical masterclass in front of a respectful crowd, and for once, WCW not screwing around with it. The bout itself was an all-out dungeon match, reversals, chain wrestling, storytelling without saying a word. You could tell Bret was putting everything he had into it, and so did Benoit, to be fair. Every lockup, every hold, every single transition had purpose. After picking up a win with the sharpshooter, Bret saluted his brother while looking up at the rafters. He and Benoit embraced, the crowd applauded, and Bret looked up to the ceiling one more time before leaving the ring. No nonsense, no factions, no storylines, no swerves, just two men doing what they do best and paying tribute the only way they knew how, through wrestling. Before he was the Painmaker, the Demo God, the Learning Tree, or whatever he's calling himself these days, Chris Jericho was just WCW's most entertaining mid-card heel. During his run as Cruiserweight Champion in 1998, Jericho gave WCW fans some of Nitro's funniest promos, and that's not an exaggeration either. He was a real highlight of WCW programming when he became a heel. The conspiracy victim angle was Jericho doing everything he could to prove that WCW officials, especially JJ Dillon, were screwing him over. Dean Malenko had tricked Chris by dressing up as Cyclope at Slamboree 98, the Ayatollah lost his Cruiserweight belt to Dean, and Jericho said it was all a big conspiracy. There was no fairness or righteousness involved when Dean took Chris's belt away, and so Jericho went on a mission to expose this conspiracy. Nitro stopped off in Washington DC on the 1st of June 98, and so Chris roamed the nation's capital in an effort to, quote, go over JJ Dillon's head. He went to the Supreme Court, he went to the Library of Congress, he tried to get into the White House, but the only people who would hear Chris out were folks driving past him while he held up a conspiracy victim sign, and some random lady who had no idea what was going on. Jericho was out here creating actual entertainment with zero budget. He made the Cruiserweight division fun outside of what happened in the ring, and WCW, in all its wisdom, decided to let him walk. Brilliant. Many people consider this the peak. Monday Nitro, Georgia Dome, packed to the rafters, Hulk Hogan vs Goldberg for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. No pay-per-view, virtually no build, no bait and switch. They gave it away for free, and it was effective simply based on how much it's referenced today when people talk about Monday Nitro. This was Goldberg's coronation. It was time to cash in and all that crowd momentum. The Georgia Dome was white hot and the atmosphere inside the venue was incredible. Hogan milked every second of the match. The NWO did their usual interference. Billy Boy gets a little help from DDP and Karl Malone before hitting his spear, and then Hogan takes a jackhammer. While this happens, the background consists of a crowd going absolutely insane as they suddenly realise they're about to witness history. 1, 2, 3, and then there's a huge explosion in the audience. Fans are throwing their hands up in the air, people are hugging strangers. It's probably the loudest Monday Nitro ever got. Say what you want about WCW hotshotting this on free TV, but it was lightning in a bottle. They had the right guy, the right crowd, the right moment, and they didn't screw it up. Can't say the same about the end of Goldberg's title run, but it sure did start in one of the best ways possible. Doesn't matter if you like Goldberg or not, this is one incredible moment from WCW Nitro. Oh boy, this one's legendary for all the wrong reasons. So here's the setup. The Four Horsemen were building towards a big reunion and Arn Anderson had recently retired due to injury. He gave one of his best and most heartfelt promos of his career when he offered Kurt Hennig his spot in the Horsemen. Not any spot, but his spot. Kurt would become the enforcer of the Four Horsemen if Hennig accepted. Does anyone really remember this promo though? I'm sure many do, but way more people remember the NWO's parody. Out comes Conan, Buff Bagwell, Six and Nash the next week, all dressed up as the Horsemen. Nash, playing Arn Anderson, stumbles to the ring with a beer belly, a fake limp and a cooler full of beers. He proceeds to butcher the original promo, making fun of Arn and turning a respected moment into a frat boy sketch show. To be clear, the parody was funny in that dark, tasteless NWO way, but man, it was pretty brutal. Arn and the Horsemen weren't just being mocked, they were being humiliated. Nash was bringing up Arn's drinking and whatnot. And it turns out it was Arn's wife who took exception to this rather than members of the Four Horsemen. And Kevin Nash said the NWO didn't get any heat at all for the parody until Arn got home. Still, the segment lives on in infamy and it shows just how far the NWO would go to get heat. You could argue that it crossed the line, but either way, it's one of the most unforgettable promos in Nitro history for better or for worse. I thought it was pretty funny. It was entertaining. This one gets seriously overlooked and I'm pretty sure it's something other people wouldn't think of. I'm not talking about the Kidman vs Hoovy match for the Cruiserweight title or the rematch weeks later. I'm talking about their encounter from May 25th, 1998 when Kidman was still part of Raven's flock. I know it sounds random, but seriously, go and check it out for yourself. It's a fantastic match that must have made people realise backstage that Billy Kidman was legit. Hoovy was no slouch either. He ended up winning this extremely fast-paced match that was filled with high-risk moves. But what sets it apart from other cruiserweight encounters from this era was the incredible timing both men displayed in the ring. It's proper edge-of-your-seat stuff if you allow yourself to get lost in it. Even the crowd, who, let's just say how it is, wasn't always kind to cruiserweight matches, was completely locked in. Two talented guys doing what they do best and reminding people that WCW wasn't just about the NWO, it was also about actual wrestling. Crazy, I know. Again, this choice may sound random, but please watch the match and you'll know exactly why I put it in this video. It's really good. It's my favourite moment in Nitro history and I don't even consider myself a hardcore Ric Flair fan. I just love the pure emotion on display and how real this felt. September 14th, 1998, Greenville, South Carolina, Horseman country. That night was pure magic and I don't say that lightly. So here's the context. Flair had been gone for a few months, stuck in a real-life legal battle with WCW. He took time off to attend his son's amateur wrestling tournament, a fairly normal dad move, but Eric Bischoff didn't like that. Eric, being the forward-thinking genius he was, decided to suspend Flair, sue him, and cut Rick completely from Nitro. The same Ric Flair who helped build the company. It makes sense, right? Fans knew he was gone, wrestlers knew it, and for the most part people figured that was it. Flair was finished with WCW, but on this particular night in Greenville, we were all in for a shock. The episode was being hyped as the official Four Horsemen reunion, and Arn Anderson had been teasing the new Horseman lineup. Arn gets in the ring and he starts introducing the new crew. Dean Malenko, the cold, no-nonsense technician. Chris Benoit, intensity personified. Steve McMichael. Look, not every pick was a home run, okay? We think Arn's done introducing the new lineup, but he then calls himself a goof because he forgot to introduce the final member of the group. Arn tells Ric Flair to get his ass out of the ring, and then it happens. Nature Boy Ric Flair's music hits, the crowd loses its collective mind. People are jumping up and down like they just won the lottery. Tony Schiavone sounds like he's about to pass out. This wasn't just a pop, this was a fucking WCW spiritual awakening. Out walks Flair in a suit, crying before he even gets in the ring. He wasn't acting, this was a man who just got let back into the house that he helped build. He hugs the guys, he hugs Arn, he then grabs the mic, and this is when things go from great to legendary. Rick thanks the fans for the overwhelming support. He says this night makes him realise that everything he had done in wrestling was totally worth it, and for once Ric Flair sounded completely humbled. Ric Flair then goes on to cut the most Ric Flair promo of all time. He screams, he cries, he rambles a bit, he fires up when talking about the Horseman being alive and well, and he tears Eric Bischoff apart. It's a complete massacre towards the end of the promo as Rick talks about how Bischoff wanted him to disband the Horseman. Eric walks out, Flair calls him an overbearing, abusive, no good son of a bitch. You can just tell Flair had been saving every word of this promo since the day he was sued. It seemed more like therapy for Ric Flair rather than your typical Nature Boy promo. I'm going to be bold here and say WCW and even Eric Bischoff didn't deserve this moment. They spent years burying Flair, downplaying his legacy, treating him like yesterday's news. But on this night, Rick reminded everyone that he was WCW. There wasn't a single person on the WCW roster who could have made this feel as legitimate as Ric Flair did. Absolutely one of the greatest moments in Nitro history, period. 10 out of 10, would cry again. So there you go, 15 awesome Nitro moments that prove WCW wasn't always a complete disaster. For every botched finish or pointless celebrity cameo, there was at least one moment that genuinely popped the crowd and reminded us why we tuned in every week. And yeah, maybe some of these got overshadowed by the usual backstage nonsense, and maybe a few were followed up in the most WCW way possible by, forgetting they ever happened. But that doesn't take away from how great they were in the moment. Nitro at its best felt unpredictable, chaotic in a fun way, and for a while, it was the coolest wrestling show on TV. These moments captured the magic even if it was just for a few seconds at a time, and as wrestling fans, as you know, that's what we live for. Thanks for watching everyone, and please take care.